All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're 7 minutes in, so I want to make use of everyone's time. Quick introductions. We have Ryan Collins of Bethel School of Technology, CEO and author of God of Tech, and Nathanael Coffing, CTO of Servant.io, and also founder of Cloudentity, AI expert and all-around technologist. So today's conversation is about the intersection of faith and AI, or technology broadly, but with a specific attention drawn to AI. And I want to get a chance to hear from both of you guys about your experience as technologists and your vision for AI down the road. So I'd like to start with just some introductions, if that's okay. Ryan, you go first. I want to hear about your background and a little bit about Bethel School of Technology.
Sure, yeah. I am the CEO and founder of Bethel School of Technology. We're the first and still only online Christian coding bootcamp in the world. We launched in January of 2018. And so we're about 7 years in to an amazing ride where we're equipping kingdom-minded believers with some of the most in-demand tech skills like cybersecurity, data science, software development, UI, UX design. And they go and get high-paying, high-growth careers in tech. And we also teach them biblical values, kingdom values that are in-demand soft skills for these companies as well. So things like a culture of honor, healthy relationship and community, brave communication, interpersonal communication, all these things that companies are investing millions of dollars to improve their culture. And so we send them out, and it's been a wonderful experience in the first 8 years, and it feels like we're just getting started too. So
Love that. And tell us about the book you've written, God of Tech.
yeah, I released a book last year called The God of Tech, and it's about modern technology, its divine origin, and activating the next great move of God through spirit-led innovation. So that was kind of a 2.5 year journey of research and learning, and just hearing the Lord tell me that He wants to redeem the tech space as I was meeting with a couple of Fortune level tech companies in Silicon Valley, and so that set me on this journey to discover if there was a moment in modern history where the Lord partnered with believers to create the foundation for our modern tech space. And incredibly, He did. And it was about 150 years ago. So really, it's kind of a state of the union, like where we came from, where we're at currently, and where we need to go as far as God's plan and purpose to use technology so that all would taste to see it and see His goodness.
Love that. I'm going to come back around and ask you lots more questions about this. And I
Sure.
expect anyone who's joined in on this webinar to do the same in the QA portion. But before we do that, over to you, Nathaniel. What's your
Oh, sure.
background and some of your experience?
Oh, Nathanael Coffing, longtime technologist. I actually started playing with what was the precursor to AI back in the 90s. It was called Lisp, for those of you that may or may not remember it. Went on from there working at some such tech luminaries as like Sun Microsystems, helping build the big freaking web tone switch, and leading their foray into server-side software. Did 3 different startups, 2 exits, one public, one PE, and then joined Servant right after that. Excited to use those skills to help drive Servant forward both in the marketplace and in leading tech for good and tech for God. And so very, very excited to be here with Ryan and everyone else talking about how we can use AI to further those causes.
Right on. All right, cool. Back to you, Ryan. I want to ask you, you mentioned the phrase redeem the tech space. What does that mean? What is there to be redeemed?
Yeah, so let me kind of walk you through what happened. So it was about 3 or 4 months after we started Bethel Tech, and one of the unexpected impacts was that we started getting invited to all these major tech companies. They were very curious about our school. So we knew that there would be churches and ministries that would be cheering us on and supporting us and believing for us and praying for us. But we started getting invited to Apple and Google and Facebook and LinkedIn and Salesforce. We did a panel discussion at Google's headquarters on the intersection of Christianity and technology. It was this phenomenal event where you could see these technologists lean in to the idea that God wants to partner with you to create radical heavenly solutions to solve the world's hardest problems. And so anyways, I was on the Bay Bridge in the San Francisco area. I just got done meeting with a major tech company and going across the bridge to meet with another tech company. And I'm stuck in bumper to bumper traffic, and I hear the Lord say in my heart, Ryan, I'm redeeming the tech space so that all will taste and see my goodness. And so I tucked that away. It really just validated the mission that we had built with Bethel Tech that, one, we are a vocational program. So we help people get in, get out, and get a job for a fraction of the time, fraction of the cost of what you would see at a, 4-year university with immediately applicable skills. But this idea that we're a vehicle to usher the presence of God into what I believe is the most influential sphere of society, which is the tech space. And so, and then about a month later, I was driving again, and I felt the Lord say in my heart, Ryan, what do you think I meant when I said I'm redeeming the tech space? And I had kind of bought into the drive-by narrative that God and tech were mutually exclusive. He said, "Go look up what the word redeem means," and then I thought that he was going to graft it in and use it for good, and graft it into His will. That's something that was built apart from Him. He said, "Go look up what redeem means." So I looked it up, and redeem means regain possession of. And so he said, "I'm regaining possession of something that's near and dear to my heart, that points to my creativity, my innovation, and I want to use this as a tool to magnify Jesus as the solution that the world is crying out for." So that really became the impetus of my book. And I was going to call it Redeeming Tech. That was the first chapter in the book, and so it just really kind of grew from there. So I do believe that God does have a plan and purpose for technology, and it is a tool, and it takes on the function of its user. So we can use it for good, or you can use it for bad. And so I want to use it to promote the gospel of Jesus and to help people encounter His love. I think that's the tipping point for a massive move of God in our world.
How do you see AI fitting into that? Using tech for good versus bad. This is such a hot topic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it'd be great to hear Nathaniel. What he says is he's the technologist. So my background too, it's interesting. My background's in journalism prior to building, and then I got into corporate partnerships. So prior to starting Bethel Tech, I had 10 years of experience in building corporate education partnerships. So I like to say that I focus on the why behind the how, to activate the next generation to do the what and the how, so people can discover their why through technology. And so, yeah, AI is really a tool that amplifies intent. So it does take on the function of its user, and I think it has massive potential for us to use it to help people. I mean, there's so many practical aspects to that. I mean, we use it in our business all the time. I was using it. My one of my daughters, who's a freshman, and she's going through geometry and some really difficult concepts. And so I just plugged in, actually took a picture of one of the problems that I was stumped on, and asked it to act like a tutor and solve this and describe it. And it did. And it was wonderful. It's like, oh my gosh, this is phenomenal. And it clicked for her. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities to use this as a tool that streamlines, it optimizes things that we do. And ultimately, it helps us be able to lean in, and as believers that have a responsibility and a stewardship to bring the gospel to all the nations. I think that this is a really beautiful opportunity. It's a wonderful advancing technology that I think that we're still at kind of the beginning phases of.
You said a phrase, amplify intent.
Mhm.
Flesh that out a little bit, and then I
Yeah.
want to toss it back to Nathaniel after this for his
Yeah,
presentation.
So it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but I don't know. It's probably about a year ago. Google's it might have been Gemini or it was Bard, but their AI came under a lot of fire because when you had basically AI is basically a reflection of the humans that train it. So whatever you're putting in the input, you're going to produce the output. Whatever it decides to utilize in terms of the data that it processes to create that solution or that output is really important. And so, I mean, it was a really awful situation. You could ask their AI, create an image of a Nazi war soldier, and it was an African American in a Nazi suit with a smile on his face. Like, that's insanely awful and completely off. You could ask it to create an image of the Pope, and it was an Eastern Indian woman, like, so things like that. And so it was interesting. There was an ex-Googler that was interviewed. I think it was by the Free Press, which is a phenomenal publication. I think Barry Weiss is the one that founded that. But he was basically saying it doesn't surprise me at all, because the way that Google has been set up with their, kind of their DEI focus and what he would call their woke practices is really the AI that they create is really just a reflection of that. So I think that that's important because it does take on the function of its user, and it is important to know that all AI, at least at this point, is just a reflection of the humans that train it.
Well said. And that's the perfect segue. I'm going to pass it over to Nathaniel. He's got a little bit of a deck that talks about what AI is, how it works, what it's not, and some of the implications.
All right. Well, can I build on that just a little bit?
Mhm.
What Ryan was just saying first, because Ryan, I think you're bang on, right? Meaning it's a tool, right? When mankind first wanted to dig a hole, we used our fingers. Then we got a rock. Then we made a shovel, and then we built excavators, right? And that's kind of what we're doing, and it helps you get to the crux of who you are and what you want to do that much faster because that's your intent. When we have maligned intent or intents that aren't in line with the Word of God, it'll dig that hole, right, in the wrong way twice, 10 times, 1,000 times as fast. However, that's one of the core reasons that we need to think about technology and redeeming technology to make sure it's digging to expose, the heart of Christ, it's exposing the Great Commission, to expose like how we can be better people and serve each other. Sorry, I just wanted to tie that in.
That's really good. I'm glad you did.
Before we went into a deck, give me 1 second. Let me share this out. All right. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
So when we think about AI, it's important to think that, it is kind of, this is one of the first versions of it, although it's been kicking around since the mid 50s, to be honest with you. How can we build automation? How can we build things faster? How can we help computers to analyze what they're doing or what they've been told to do? Because again, they are nothing more than a tool. One of the first technologies was tar, building the ark, right? A redemptive cause that saved humanity. But it was also used to build the Tower of Babel, right? Something that tore us all apart, created independent languages, and brought confusion into mankind. So as we think about what it is, AI is really sets of linear algebra, right? So what they're looking at is, and this is what Ryan was alluding to, the data that you train, the frequency occurrence of words, how they're placed next to other words, how they're all integrated, what they look like from a broader sequencing perspective. And it's making sense of these giant large data sets and then creating probabilities of them falling next to each other. That's a very big simplification of what's happening, but underlying, it is math, right? So it's making these large data sets, it's bringing it together, and that can be both individual information or it could be proprietary information. So you can take it into your organization and use it to expose maybe efficiencies in your business that are missing or in your nonprofit that are missing, or to do a better job of identifying and profiling a user so we know how to reach out to them, right? So it can function on both sides, bringing in some of that EQ that us technologists in particular often miss. That's a personal dig. There are two major types of AI. One is what we see all of the buzz about, generative AI, which I like to think of as like a front-end AI, right? And that's what we see ChatGPT doing. That's what we see Bard or Gemini doing, Claude, Perplexity, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really interesting because it creates these great looking chat bots, right? We just talk to and hang out with, looking front ends that you can do in one shot. Like one good prompt, and bada boom, bada bing, I can have a working data visualization of some types of data sets. And that is based on the patterns that are coming out from the data that it already knows about and any other ancillary data that I feed into it. The second one is what we've more traditionally thought of as ML, right? It's this deep learning. And so as I think about data lakes, right, or data swamps, as people like to affinitively refer to them at this juncture, because we put too much into them, how can it find patterns in between different data elements, sort those patterns, and try to both classify and use that data in a multi-layered neural network, right? So it can build on that data to expose, again, going back to like corporate inefficiencies or business inefficiencies, what's going right, what's going wrong. At its fundamental or at its core, right, it's all about the algorithms. And those algorithms are reflective of what's been put into them. So how has it been trained is going to dictate what comes back out of it. It's not like it's going out and discovering all net new things. that are out of this, out of Earth or out of the universe, right? It's literally only regurgitating what it's fed or what you've asked it to go find. And it's really important to remember that. It's not creating kind of all new things yet. It's reordering what it knows to sometimes generate something better, sometimes generate something worse. We've all heard of hallucinations and such, where it comes back with wildly wrong answers, or maybe we've experienced them. Those algorithms, as I said, they're not neutral, and they reflect the authors of the algorithms as opposed to reflecting neutral and how can we say that? I'm sorry, at a loss for words. as opposed to reflecting neutrality and divining truth, I think is really what I'm trying to parlay. So it's no longer what has it learned from other people, or it stays in what it's learned from other people, and it's not able to create these net new things, right? And without being a creator, right, it cannot be out of line with our creator. And hence, when we use it in the right ways and we feed it the right data, we get very, very valuable feedback back. If we give it the wrong data, we get black Nazi soldiers. Now, what I think is almost more interesting than necessarily how AI works is how it's kind of recreating how we learn and interact with each other. So it's decentralizing the concept of truth. What I used to have to go to an Encyclopedia Britannica for at the library or in the Library of Congress. Now I can feed that into AI, I can ingest it, and I can reconsume that almost anywhere. And the latter generations, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, right, are looking at those and they're trusting the truths that they're presented with, right? And sometimes it goes awry with like a photoshopped image. Sometimes it goes very, very well, meaning, there's some great data that comes back out of, public AIs. And that can be used to both learn from geometry lesson, or it can be used to deceive or disinformation, which would be, the Nazi soldier. So when we think about how can we use AI for good, right? We think about data, algorithms, and bias, right? So how can I feed it the best data and the most truthful data? How can I create my AI and grow it off of a solid foundation, right? Biblical foundation. How can we build the algorithms, right, that relate to that information and make sure that if there is indeed any bias, first, we'd like to get rid of the bias, but secondly, because we can't based upon the data that's fed it, how can we ensure that bias is oriented towards the worldview that we know to be truth? And I think I'll turn it back to you, Jake, so we can continue the discussion.
I appreciate that. I have some questions for you just right off the bat, Nathaniel, and Ryan, jump in too. I kind of want to hear both of you on this. I'm imagining a case scenario where, like, let's say we're all at a Thanksgiving dinner together and my sister's there. She's not a technologist. She doesn't understand AI, and she's probably even afraid of it. Or maybe my mom, afraid of AI. What would you guys say to her? This is what it actually is. This is what it's not. You should be afraid for X reasons, or you don't need to be afraid for Y reasons.
So there's, in my mind, there's things to worry about, right? Which is AI being able to do our jobs because, as we moved into the manufacturing and industrial age, what did we do? We tried to find highly repetitive tasks that were sometimes highly skilled, and then to automate those as best we could, but then still have a man in the middle. We can do the same thing for lots and lots of tasks with AI. We've been doing it from an automation point of view with server builds for quite some time, meaning the last 15 years, depending upon what industry you're in. And now it's moving further upstream and upstack into the application build pieces. Now, that being said, we have to be very clear about what it's not, right? So AI is not generating your idea. AI is taking your idea, maybe helping you think through it and allowing you to expand on it or expound on it, and then reprocess that idea to generate an application. That's very interesting. I can't just go to AI and say, hey, make me a better pizza maker, right? What it's going to come back with is, well, pizza gets cooked at 450 to 1600 degrees. What type of pizza do you want? And that's causing me to refine how I think about how to make pizza. Like, what kind of pizza do I want? Do I want a Chicago deep dish, or do I want, an Italian very thin crust? And I can use those same type of qualifications to write better requirements for the product that I wish to use AI to recreate.
How about you, Ryan? How would you answer this question
Yeah,
for my mom?
I would want to know what she's afraid of. So if it's just afraid of, using new technology and just having to keep up with something like this, then I think it becomes a conversation about practicality and just kind of walking through how, you can use artificial intelligence to support whatever you're doing. Like I think, Nathan hit the nail on the head that, this isn't creative. So it's not supposed to replace human ingenuity. It's not supposed to replace human connectivity as well, or creativity. And I think that's where some of the fear comes in, is if we start we start replacing our human connection with how much we are connected to our machines and to to artificial intelligence. I mean, these are far. Oftentimes, you hear kind of like the outliers, kind of the extremes in situations. So you would hear about the rise of AI boyfriends and girlfriends, and just the fact that everything that you should be getting from a human connection, now you're receiving because of the sophistication of the communication of artificial intelligence with a human. And then when it comes into replacing human decision making, I think that gets a little scary too. I remember a few years ago, some friends that were working on the artificial intelligence, machine learning for self-driving cars. And one of the things that they would talk to me about is, just because we can build this technology, should we? And the idea of like, there's philosophical kind of exercise of the trolley problem. Like, and I don't know if you guys have heard this or not, but
Yeah.
this was back in the late 60s, early 70s. It's like, what do you do in basically a no-win situation? Who wins and who loses? So the idea in the 60s and 70s that you had this trolley that was going off course, and there's two tracks that it go on. And the one track, there's like five people that would, or there's one person on one track that if you continued on that path, you would hit them and kill them. If you went in this other track, that this track was actually going to fall off, and then everybody in the car would die. And so this idea of trolley problem version 2.0, like if you're using a self-driving car and the car is making decisions based on all the data and assessing the information that it has, and you're coming into a situation to where you might come on with a collision with somebody in the road, does it protect the human inside the car or outside the car? And those are the things I think that we need to realize, that there is something embedded in our DNA. Like, God made us in his image, and there's a human will and an ingenuity that cannot be manufactured or replicated. It's actually the essence of who we are, especially when we tap into our relationship with the Lord, that we get to come up with solutions with him. We get to dream, we get to build impossible things with him. And so if we do that, if we basically submit that part of our lives to robots, to artificial intelligence, we become slaves to the very things that we've built. And so if that's the conversation, if that's the concern, then I think it's really important as humans that we see those little foxes in the vineyards that end up ruining the grapevine, that to not let computers, let artificial intelligence replace what was only intended for human to human interaction and relationship with the Lord.
Are you guys familiar with any specific companies or technologies that have been stood up that protect against that are safeguarding us from going down those paths? Or is that like, that's what's coming and we have to figure out how to do that?
I don't know, Nathan, you might be able to answer that question better than me.
I mean, there's lots of companies that are trying to figure out how to do safety and safeguarding in different capacities, right? Like, obviously, nobody wants people to use OpenAI to build automated hacking tools, right? But are people safeguarding against human nature? Not really. They're trying to safeguard against the worst things of human nature, but they are not actually doing things that are protecting, the will of God and how we think about how we're going to work with the church.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting too. I mean, I remember, Sam Altman, who's the founder of OpenAI, and he had basically proposed that there needs to be some type of legislative representation for basically AI. If you think of AI as an additional state that you can, be a part of Congress or be a part of the government to make sure that certain rules are in place and enacted, because a lot of this has to come down to like who controls the data too. And I've heard different sessions, keynotes on like the rise of digital dictatorships and what individuals will do with the amount of information that they have, and how they will be able to lord it over people, and even how they're pushing them toward different narratives. And so I think that's really important, that we need to safeguard and make sure that we have certain gates and security measures to make sure that we're not we're not getting ourselves into a situation where data is being used against us. It's being used to withhold things from us. And even I think on even maybe a lesser degree, but very important, is making sure that algorithms aren't being purposely used to persuade us or move us into a direction that would be harmful to us. So, and that would even boil down to algorithms basically based on the information that it gathers from us in our use of the Internet of Things and internet, determining who we are based on the information that we seek out. So that would be something that you see this even with social media, and how different sponsorships, different ads are being targeted to people based on their demographic, and and it's actually created a lot of problems, especially for like teenage girls and some of their like self-identity. They're in a self-identity crisis because of the images that are being pushed toward them, and what they're trying to get them to buy or to believe about themselves.
It feels to me like this is bringing me back to the phrase you used, Ryan, that AI amplifies intent. We have this world full of people who are all building AI tools and using them. And if all of them who are building it have malintent, we're going to end up with a lot of bad, destructive AI. But if there's a call to arms where Christians realize they have that they can be inspired to, or even called to, build things with the Lord's intent in mind, the opposite is true. This tool can be used to bless humanity.
Yep.
So I'm curious, have you seen demand for that at Bethel School of Technology? Are people coming in, getting started with the things that you teach specifically to use towards AI stuff?
Yeah, and so I mean, just our disciplines we started with full stack software development. That's our flagship program, because when we started 7 years ago, we just looked at where the biggest demand in the market was for talent, and that was overwhelmingly. You could go to any major job site, and you'll see thousands of jobs for developers. And then we started launching UI UX design, cybersecurity, data science. And built within our data science and our data analytics programs, our foundation, well, first of all, the Python language, and which is a foundational language for AI and machine learning. And we do we do teach fundamentals of AI and machine learning, but it really is just a starting point. So those are things that we're looking to build upon. And but yeah, I mean, we have a lot of people that want to come in. Like, here's the deal. Like, there are probably 250 coding schools in the country now. Like, they're really good coding schools. And the whole premise is, it's from a vocational perspective: get in, get out, get a job. We have that perspective too, but our students come in and they're thinking bigger than themselves. Like, what they want to, the transformation that they receive, the learning that they receive in our program, whether it's on the vocational, the hard skill side, but also the character skills. Like, they want to then carry that out into any environment. They want to usher the presence of God into the environments that they're called into. So there is very much an eternal mindset, an eternity mindset for individuals who come through our program, knowing that this is about you, but it's also not about you. It's not just about you, and I think that's really important. And so I think that's what really draws people to our program.
That's fantastic. I have more follow-up questions for this. In fact, as I'm looking at my list of questions here, I got a whole slew that I'd love to ask Ryan. And Nathaniel, I know you got to bounce.
Man, I just
for
want
your
to
next meeting.
hear from Nathaniel. Like, I want to hear about what he's using. Like, what's the most practical aspect that he's using with AI right now, and then some of the things that he likes to see coming down the pike. But if that's another day, but
Let's do that quick. You got 5 minutes, Nathaniel? You're on mute.
Yep.
I was saying that that's another day in general because it's a longer conversation. But just super quick, what we need to really realize is we're going to be using different AIs for different tasks. Um, and so what's coming down the pipe, and some people may have already played with them, is the idea of agents, right? So how can I spin up let me take a step back. So what's transpired is we went from like I think the best descriptor I was like you're cutting up old VHS tapes and taping them together, which was like ChatGPT probably 2. And we've gone from that to ChatGPT actually or LLMs actually being able to introspect themselves and introspect the query as well as some of the results so they can start to build steps. So if I say, one of the first things you learn in coding is like, how do you make a peanut butter jelly sandwich, right? And they try to figure out how detailed you can actually think about the activity that you're going to undergo. And it's like, oh, well, some people say, hey, just get out the bread and I put peanut butter and jelly on the side. And I was like, okay, you did. But what you really were doing is I was opening up the bag. I was untying the bag. I pulled the bread out. I put the bread on the counter. I went and got a knife. I opened up the top of the peanut butter jar. I scooped blah, blah, blah. We all know how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. So what ChatGPT, in particular the O1 model, and I'm excited to see the O2, is it starts to introspect like what is it doing? Like what are the steps to actually complete that task? And in this case, it might spin up, what we're calling an agent. And that agent is somebody that's just going to do the task, right? So if I think about that peanut butter jelly sandwich metaphor, I might have an agent that is spreading peanut butter, right? Or spreading peanut butter and or jam. I might have an agent that's opening up the jars. I might have an agent that's putting it together. So as it breaks into independent tasks, it can start to farm out the work for those tasks. And that's one of the really interesting things that's happening right now. Now, as part of that, we're also seeing specialties emerge within the big LLMs. Some are really good at coding. Some are really good at math, although they're coming together in some ways. So I don't want to go too far down different paths. But you'll use like Perplexity, right? If I want a really concise business-oriented answer, I'll use Claude if I'm exploring a new topic. I'll use ChatGPT for other things. I'll use Copilot if I'm writing code, right? Copilot for GitHub, not Copilot in Microsoft. And then I'll use things like AI DIR, like for doing check-ins and acting as a peer programmer. So you're seeing different AI types being used in different models for different tasks, and they're starting to see like a governing AI sit on top, which is what's breaking up those tasks. Now, what we haven't seen emerge yet, and I'm sure we'll see in 2025, is the ability to integrate these tasks, right? So you have the governing layer, which says, you know what, ChatGPT is best at opening bags of bread. Claude's best at spreading peanut butter. Perplexity's best at making a presentation for how efficient our peanut butter spreading is. And you'll be able to connect all of these different LLMs that are to use best of breed from a singular query. And with that, I'm sorry, I do have to run. But that's the beginning of the next conversation.
Deal. We can do more. And it's
So
okay with me because I have questions for Ryan. So thanks for your time today. It's good to see you.
We'll talk soon.
All right. So Ryan, the next thing that I want to explore a little bit is if I imagine myself as someone who is, let's say I'm a Christian professional and maybe I'm 25, feeling a little bit like I'm wandering in my career, looking for something that's more challenging and rewarding. Maybe I'm watching this presentation and I'm like, this could be interesting to me. What would you say to that person? What are the practical next steps and also just like inspirationally?
Yeah. Well, I think, if you have a curiosity for this, first of all, that's a great marker for a technologist. Like curiosity as a software developer wanting to find solutions to problems is really an important aspect of who someone is and kind of how they're bent and when they're a developer. So if there's a curiosity, I would start looking for things. There's a lot of like open source, like there's a lot of free resources that you can start with. Even on YouTube, and maybe some low cost just to kind of get your feet wet with some of these massive open online courses like Coursera or Udemy. And as you kind of get more acclimated with something like this, and you think that it's something that you want to pursue, then I would encourage you to go to a program, reach out to a program like ours, because it is, once you get into the rigor of it, it's not easy, and so for some people, like, I'd say, over 95% of our students have no background in tech before they go through our program. And so our program's 36 weeks long. They're drinking from a fire hose for 9 months. And then, and then they're at the same time, they're learning how to actually approach hiring managers to get jobs. And so, I would say reach out to Bethel Tech, or we are we are specifically Christian Coding Bootcamp, and talk to one of our counselors. And we're very much, our philosophy is high touch, high support. So you've got this, 6 to 8 different touch points throughout your program, whether that's a student success coach, a coding mentor, a coding instructor, a pastor, a spiritual mentor, and a career services team. We are here. We are designed to help you succeed. So that is something that I think the reason why historically we've had great outcomes with our students getting jobs. Fortune magazine listed as one of the top 10 coding schools in the country last year, and it really does boil down to that level of support, and that we're continuing to iterate our curriculum to meet the demands of the market and where it's going. So I would say, if you're curious, lean into it, and don't disqualify yourself because you don't have a background in tech. Don't think that you can't do it because maybe you don't look like people that you think are kind of the stereotypical person in technology. Start doing your research, start testing it, kick the tires on some things for free, and then reach out to Bethel Tech or another coding school maybe that you like, and start talking to their advisors to see if this is a good fit for you.
Excellent. And what's the website that people should go to?
Yeah, we just updated. So we're now a college. So it's bethelcollege.edu/technology. So, or you could go to betheltech.net and it'll redirect you. So we just launched that new, we became an accredited college. And so the tech school is part of an accredited college now.
Congrats, man.
Thank you.
That's a big accomplishment.
It is.
All right,
a lot of
we'll
work,
say
man.
this again at the end here, but I just wanted to give you a chance to say that while it was top of mind. All right, now I want to back up a little bit.
Mhm.
You told us some of the impetus for the book and
Mhm.
being on a drive and hearing the Lord say he was going to redeem technology. What about the impetus for the school, the college? Where did that come from?
Yeah. Oh man, that is a really great question. So just to give you, a little bit of background. Again, I mentioned that I was in corporate education partnerships for 10 years. And prior to starting Bethel Tech, I was with a company that built online degree programs for colleges and universities across the country. I was overseeing the corporate partnerships, basically tying the degree programs that we had built for these universities with companies that were wanting to reskill or upskill their employees, or hire the graduates that came out of our degree programs. So companies like Liberty Mutual, Microsoft, IBM, Bank of America, Verizon. Then we acquired this little coding school out of Akron, Ohio, and that kind of became part of our portfolio. And as soon as these companies heard that we had this coding school, they really wanted to focus on hiring the talent out of that coding school and then sending their employees to the program so that they could move them into tech roles. Because a lot of these companies realize that the future of work is in tech, and that even if it wasn't, what we would perceive as a tech company like a Microsoft or an IBM or a Google, companies like Chipotle and Bank of America and Walmart, they consider themselves to some extent a tech company as well. And they are increasing their digital footprint and needing developers like yesterday to make sure that they can meet the initiatives they have from a tech perspective. And there's a massive shortfall in demand in terms of the talent meeting the demand in our country. It's about 1 million job shortfall over the next couple of years. So that's another thing. Like, look at, for somebody who's is curious about this, like, look at where the demand is. The projected growth for IT and software development, cybersecurity, it's about 30% growth over the next decade, which is far outpaces any other industry. And so anyways, we had this coding school, and then I helped spearhead a tech hire grant up in Queens, New York. It was a $4 million grant, and it was to help a highly impoverished community learn in-demand skills so they could get high-paying, high-growth careers in technology. And we set up a 16-week program for people to code Java. We'd have single moms bust into our program. We'd set up daycare for their kids. They'd learn to code Java, and then 3 months later, they go and get these $80,000 jobs.
Wow.
Yeah, it was phenomenal, Jake. And I had this thought when you started seeing the fruit of that. I said, this is how you transform communities. And as soon as I had that thought, I heard the Lord say in my heart, you're absolutely right, Ryan. Would you build something like this with me, where people didn't just discover what they're capable of, but they discovered their identity as my son and my daughter, and I love them dearly. I made them on purpose and for a purpose. So that was the seed of Bethel Tech being planted in my heart. That was 2015. I didn't know it at the time, but it definitely, it was something that I didn't take lightly. And then through a series of divine connections connected with Bethel, the Lord had called us from Oklahoma City. We were living in Oklahoma City at the time to Redding. We didn't know why. And I was connected to a very influential person in the online higher education space. I mean, his face would be on Mount Rushmore of online higher ed pioneers and influencers. And he was posting all these articles about coding schools, which piqued my interest because of what I was working on. Then he posted a picture of himself with the senior pastor of Bethel Church, Bill Johnson. So I just reached out to this guy in a DM on LinkedIn. So it's great, the power of technology and connection. And I told him, hey, we're moving to, the Lord has called us to Redding, California. We don't necessarily know why, but here's my background. And I felt compelled to reach out to you because of the things that you're posting. He said, can we talk tomorrow? And so we got on the phone the next day. And after he's like, man, this is a Kairos moment. Like, this is a divine setup. Like, I've been talking to a senior leader at Bethel Church about building the first ever Christian coding school. We've been praying for someone who could come into our environment,
Wow.
and who could run it. He goes, you're that guy. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're the CEO of Bethel Tech. And so it just really started coming into focus, but it really did boil down to us saying yes to the Lord, even though we couldn't see the next step. Like, we had said yes, we had already planned on moving out to Redding. I was planning on working my job at the time remote, because I was already doing that remotely anyways. And then the Lord just orchestrated all this. And the reason for it was God has a plan and a purpose for technology, and he's inviting his sons and daughters to get engaged. The church needs to engage in this space. Like, the church actually was at the forefront of technology, and then it basically surrendered the opportunity and the momentum because it walked away from it. And so now what we see is that the drive-by narrative for technology is that God and tech are mutually exclusive. But I would submit to you that they are intrinsically and eternally linked. And if the book goes through all of that, starting with these incredible spirit-led believers from the mid-19th century that created the foundations. James Clerk Maxwell is the one that I talk about the most. But set the foundation for, and the discovery of basically the principles of our technology that we use today. And so, Bethel Tech really is to equip kingdom-minded believers with the most in-demand skills so they could go and serve companies with excellence in both skill and character and usher the presence of God into these spheres. We have confidence in the authority and the superior reality of the kingdom of heaven that resides in us. And so we can bring hope into hopeless situations, and joy and peace and healing and restoration and reconciliation, and people encountering the love of Christ. And that's really the bigger picture. That's the eternity mindset that we really focus on. And the tech learning and the tech vocation, it's just a vehicle for that bigger picture.
Man, I love this so much. I can imagine there's two ways a person might feel, both of which are going to resonate so much with what you're saying. First is, the world's changing like light speed right now, and I have a fear that my job might be obsolete sooner rather than later. And you're saying, brother, sister, hop in. We need your help to build this next era, and you're going to be in demand more than you've ever been before. Might make more money. Like, it'll be purposeful work. Problem solved. And the other thing is, like, maybe you feel a little bit, we mentioned this earlier, like kind of wandering in your career, not sure if what you're doing has a purpose, and boy, you're laying it out. There's so much purpose in this, things to be built for the Lord's glory, even in technology. Now, you mentioned in the book talking about where we've been, where we're at right now, and where we're going.
Mhm.
And it feels to me like there's this history of how the church, capital C church, and technology have danced over the last 2,000 years, and when that dance stopped and why. And then, but that history isn't top of mind for people. So I'm wondering if you can sort of talk through that, because it's going to set the
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's probably a much longer conversation, but I do think that, as spirit-led believers, like, the Apostle Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 2, that we receive wisdom from the Lord, spirit to spirit, and it's incomprehensible to man apart from God, and that we actually
Mm,
operate with the mind of Christ. And so, and we know that in Colossians 1 that says that he was before all things, and in him all things exist and are held together. So science in its purest form is, I mean, you would say that the science to some level is the study of our physical reality, it's study of nature, but in its purest form, it's actually the study of creation. And when you study creation, it's an invitation to know your creator. And what's fascinating is you're seeing a lot of these incredible scientists going after new technologies that are coming across things that they can't explain. They would call them, they would call it a phenomenon, and really that's kind of someone's way of rationalizing or rationalizing what I would call a sign or a wonder from heaven. And so
mm,
we are actually on the forefront of a new technology that actually points to God as creator, which is quantum computing. So we talk about artificial intelligence right now. I actually think that that's the end of one epoch in science and technology that was started 150 years ago by James Clerk Maxwell. In fact, Einstein was once asked, "Do you stand on the shoulders of Sir Isaac Newton?" He said, "No, I stand on the shoulders of James Clerk Maxwell." He said, "One
wow.
epoch ended and began with Maxwell, because Maxwell ushered in a revolution." He's from Cambridge. He lived in mid 19th century, 1860s, 1870s. He was a devout believer. It basically memorized the Bible by the time he was a teenager.
Hmm.
But he ushered in a revolution in the way that physicists perceive the natural world. He believed that everything that we sensed in the natural world was only one part of the equation, that there had to be this underlying reality. There had to be this guiding force in an invisible realm that was causing everything to operate and exist. And it was from that perspective that he discovered that light was an electromagnetic wave, and that you could manipulate these waves in such a way that you could transfer information from one place to the next through seemingly empty space. Like, this is the foundation of Wi-Fi, radar, satellite, mobile phones, everything that you and I are taking advantage of now as we speak with this Zoom call, all stands on the shoulders of Maxwell's discoveries of electromagnetism. And I'll say this, and I know we're coming to an end, but he was publishing his theory of electromagnetism and electrodynamics at the same time that Charles Darwin was publishing his theory of evolution. Now, Maxwell was a devout believer. He believed that God was creator of the universe. He made man in his image and gave us stewardship over creation. It was our responsibility to study the works of the hands of our creator. The more that we studied, the more he would reveal his creativity and his innovation to us and through us to bring heaven on earth, radical heavenly solutions to move humanity heavenward. And so, anyways, but you had Darwin publishing his theory of evolution that moves God out of the equation of the origin story. And I like to do this exercise with our students. I'll ask them, if there's a room of 50 on a Zoom call, I'll say, "How many of you have heard of James Clerk Maxwell?" Maybe 1 out of 50, Jake, will raise their hand. And I ask them,
Wow.
"How many of you have heard of Darwin?" Uh, all 50 will raise their hand.
Hmm.
Darwin's a household name because the theory of evolution has become standardized as our unifying principle of biology in our school systems, and typically and overwhelmingly in our society now. And then there, post World War II, Richard Feynman, who's probably the greatest American physicist post World War II, he said of Maxwell's discovery, he said that 10,000 years from now, 10,000 years from now, mankind will view Maxwell's discovery as the single most important event of the 19th century. And so I think that's phenomenal, because most people today would say, actually, it's Darwin's theory of evolution that people would say was one of the most important scientific discoveries or theories of the
Hmm.
19th century. And so I do think that so much of what we do and what we build and our identity comes from what we believe our origin story is. So that's the foundation. The church actually didn't take the baton after Maxwell. Just kind of laid it at the side of the road for the enemy, the devil, to counterfeit. The devil doesn't create; he can only counterfeit and only pervert anything that has power. And I think that the technology that we're using today is one of the most powerful tools that we've ever seen in human history. And so it's our responsibility to actually get back to raising up the next Maxwells, to engage this, because God has a plan and a purpose for it. And I think we'll see that. I think we're at the tipping point of that happening. So we got to get back to it, though. And I do think, especially, and this could be a conversation for another day, just the non-intuitive components of quantum computing actually it's confounding the leading scientists in the world, to the point where they're saying there has to be a guiding force in another universe that are causing these
Wow.
subatomic particles to operate and exist. They're saying the same thing that Maxwell did 150 years ago, except for Maxwell knew the source. And so now these scientists are in a journey to discover the source. So I think whether you're a technologist, whether you're a pastor, whatever it is, like as a believer, we have an opportunity to actually bring answers to the questions that these individuals have, who are brilliant. They don't know the source yet. And so I think we're coming to that tipping point moment where these incredible scientists and technologists and innovators are discovering Emmanuel, Christ with us, and that God has created the universe.
Well, maybe the next Maxwell is going to come through Bethel Tech.
Hey man, that's what I believe. I believe we are raising that up, and we're a starting point.
That's awesome.
Journey, and so and we always tell them, like, this is just the beginning. So you continue to learn and grow, especially when you get jobs. You're going to be drinking from a fire hose with those on the job training opportunities. Continue, don't stop learning, because that's the hallmark of growth, and that's a hallmark of a great leader, is that you continue to learn, and so that's what I'm hoping for.
Well, I tell you what, we are officially doing another phone call, and I'm going to find somebody else, either somebody in your network or ours, who's a quantum computing expert, to come in and talk about this with us, just because it's going to be fun.
Yeah,
And
that'd be awesome.
lastly, let's hear you say again, where can we find you? If somebody feels like, man, maybe I'm the next Maxwell, I want to dive in. How do they get involved with Bethel
Well, you
Tech?
can go to our website. It's bethelcollege.edu or betheltech.net. If you want to check out my book, The God of Tech, it's on Amazon or any online book, store, Barnes and Noble, Target, whatever. And you can hit me up too on Instagram. I think I don't know what my handle is, but you could find me on there, and just let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. Direct you toward our team. We got a phenomenal team at Bethel Tech, and we love to explore how we can be a part of your journey that the Lord has placed on your heart for this. And so that would be awesome.
Sounds great. Very good. Well, Ryan Collins, thanks so much for your time. Everyone who's listening in, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thank
Take care,
you.
everybody. See ya.